This special meeting is called back to order. Will the secretary please note that all board members are present? The first item on the agenda is 3B, motion to adjourn the executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn the executive session? Is there a second? A motion has been made by Member Oliver and seconded by Member Parra. On that motion, those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Motion carries. The next item is 3C, motion to instruct the designated representatives of the public body regarding matters discussed in executive session as necessary. Is there a motion to, we didn't do that, though. I can skip that, right?
Yeah,
She doesn't have to do that, yeah. I was like, we didn't do that. All righty. The next item is 3D, motion to adjourn the special meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the special meeting? A motion has been made by Member Parra and seconded by Member Napa. On that motion, those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned. The study session is now called to order. Will the secretary please note that all board members are present? Please note that today's meeting is being live streamed. Also, please note that we have Spanish interpreting services available in the back of the room. Ms. Parra, do you want me to run over there with my script? Oh, there it is. I forgot we don't have to do that anymore. Will you please read that for us?
Of course, Madam Chair. Buenas tardes. Si necesita intérprete en español, favor de mirar a Joel, que se encuentra atrás del cuarto. Gracias.
Gracias. The first item is 2A, discussion of the incident at Bostrom High School. Dr. G.
President Ross, members of the board, Phoenix Union community, first of all, to those of you who have been waiting in public, we apologize. We started an executive session today, and I had a lot to discuss. And so just want to thank the board for engaging in several discussions, and thank you, public, for being patient with us behind the scenes. Tonight, I want to, we don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on this particular incident, but didn't want to not talk about this incident today. And it's our first meeting since May 19th at Bostrom High School, and thought we would just do a couple of things. One, just recap a few of the events that occurred, give some thank yous, and talk about some next steps. So first, for the general public, if you have not read, on May 19th, there was a notification that there could be a possible weapon at Bostrom High School. This was in the middle of the day. The campus administration, as you have read in public records, campus administration and school safety teams were able to identify the individual who allegedly had a weapon. At the point in time, we were notified there could be a weapon. There was no idea of what the weapon was. And so campus safety teams, as well as administration, were able to identify the individual, isolate the individual, and wait for law enforcement to arrive. Once law enforcement arrived, which they were able to quickly enter into the location where the student was currently located and being held. They were able to detain the student, and then later, while searching, that's when law enforcement identified the type of weapon. That in fact, one, there was a weapon, and two, that the type of weapon. As we saw in the news, the type of weapon that was confiscated was an AR-15. We also learned that there was a mechanism on the student that would allow that AR-15 to be even more dangerous. We also learned that the student had multiple rounds on him and in his possession. And we know that that's the type of weapon that's been used in other school shootings in our nation. And because of the magnitude of and the heaviness of that day, the type of weapon, as I've had a chance to share with the governing board, there's a heaviness and a sadness and a fear that exists in Phoenix Union since that incident. that I haven't seen or experienced before in my 14 years now in Phoenix Union. I want to thank and acknowledge the staff. What the staff went through and endured that day was extremely scary. The safety personnel, campus administration, other ESPs, other certified staff who played a role were in some ways heroic that day in ensuring that there were no casualties, very candidly. Yet we also know that on one hand you can celebrate, yes, no injuries. On the other hand, there's a lot of trauma from that day and a lot to unpack from that day. But we are grateful to the staff and the campus administrative team that was involved in ensuring that in fact no physical injuries took place that day. We still are unable to comment a lot on exactly what happened other than court documents. It's still a very active police investigation. And so we continue to fully cooperate behind the scenes with what we need to one, ensure the safety of Bostrom, ensure the safety of personnel involved, but also ensure the due process and safety rights of this individual. And our team will continue to work very closely with the court system now to make sure that we are doing our part to maintain safety in the coming days, weeks, and months as the aftermath, so to speak, becomes clear. We also, our commitment to Bostrom and to the broader community is that we unpack every incident with what's called an AAR, an after-action review, where from start to finish, what is it that we learned, what can we do differently, what can we do better, what worked, what didn't work. And so we will continue to go through that process to identify what systems worked, what systems didn't work, what systems need to be in place. Again, by all accounts, you would deem this a success, but also this was a very traumatic day for many of our staff members. We, as I've also shared with the board, we're also fully aware that this has heightened the urgency and fear across our system. And I had a chance to share with governing board in a couple of different contexts that in Phoenix Union, after we have a big incident, we've had a lot of loss, right, every year over the years. For 14 years, I've been going to, and for the last 9, while I've been at the district office, I go to campuses the day after. I've unfortunately been to over 100 day afters. The day after a car accident, the day after a student death. It's the heaviest, saddest, toughest day after I've ever been to in Phoenix Union. And what I've shared with the governing board, it feels like in some ways there's a pre-Bostrom Phoenix Union and a post-Bostrom Phoenix Union as I talk to you all. And in a moment, I'll have a chance to share some of the thoughts and insights of convenings that we've had since post-Bostrom. But I can't say too much tonight, unfortunately, but we didn't want to say nothing. And just wanted to let you all know that as information becomes available to us that can be public, as we think about different safety mechanisms that need to be in place, you'll hear a couple thoughts today. That we will stay vigilant over the summer in preparation for the launch of next school year, because we do annually anyway, but in light of what happened at Bostrom High School. I'm happy, board, publicly to answer any questions if you have any, but also happy to move on to the next item.
I'll get you. So, to the staff at Bostrom, the board does not take this lightly. I want everyone to know that. The board takes this very seriously. We also want to thank the staff at Bostrom for their dedication to our students and their fellow staff, in every school, for their dedication to our students and their fellow staff members. The board, I also want it to be known that the board's, one of our top priorities, of course, is keeping our students and staff and everyone safe. That is a priority. It seems like sometimes that gets lost. I just wanted to reiterate that. And then lastly, I've been picking on Claudio a little bit because you've actually been on my heart a lot. And you and your co-pilot, Yes. Ms. Tarkenton, back there, all quiet. You've been on my mind a lot because you do a lot, but you're very quiet behind the scenes. And so I just want you to know that we appreciate you and the work that you do quietly. You don't say, look what I did, or look what I'm doing, or look how I'm holding things together and keeping things from falling apart. And so I want you to know that we appreciate that. Board, do you have any questions or thoughts? Okay. Yes.
As a board member, we've been briefed and we have heard information that the public hasn't heard. But one of the things that I really want to lift up and name is my deep gratitude for the Bostrom safety team. We heard a lot about a person just by their title, Unit 1. I haven't heard a name, but I feel very, very grateful to that Bostrom safety team member. Our safety teams are expected to hold a very large role. And I don't think I've heard enough gratitude for what our safety teams do on pay that I don't think is adequate, on training that I have come to learn directly from certified staff that doesn't appear adequate at all. And so to Unit 1 at Bostrom High School, Bostrom Alternative Center, thank you very much for what you did in that moment on Friday with that student. Thank you.
Members, any other comments? Okay. The next item is,
Well,
yes.
I was turning my thing.
Oh, I made eye contact. Your eyes didn't say yes. I didn't
I'm
catch that.
sorry. I'll say
Member
yes.
Oliver.
Echoing what Member Napa had to say, one of the things I will say is one of the first questions that was answered was, how are we taking care of the staff that were involved in that incident? Because we do, as a board, understand how that's going to impact them, not only at the moment, but for a long time to come. So Dr. G and the exec team, let us know that they are being taken care of, and that's very important that, their trauma not be considered of non-existent. We are very understanding that even though that was the best possible outcome, they still had to endure it, and it's not lost on us that they had to endure that. So to everyone involved here at the district office, on campus, their families, we are forever grateful that it worked out the way they did, but we also know that there's going to be a long time of trauma recovery if they ever get over it, because that may not be something they ever get over. But we will make sure that and I know the executive team and the whole district will make sure that they get the assistance they need to get through this situation. And even to, our chief of staff, she made it very clear, she is very instrumental in being there and taking care of everybody all the time. And, I'm sure she shakes just like the rest of everybody. So anybody that touched any part of this, the board is very grateful for everything you do every day.
Thank you. Member Parr.
I just also want to take a moment to thank and honor the principal, Principal Michelle Jimenez and Omar Delgado, who were on site there and who had to endure a lot in this incident. It's, I think, important for us to acknowledge that we never want any of our employees to be put in these situations, obviously. And you have my commitment as our Phoenix Union community. You have my personal commitment that I will continue to advocate for a safety plan and a safety structure that actually provides you with the tools and the resources and the supports that you need to do your jobs effectively. And that you don't have to be put in these situations moving forward. But I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the administrators who were on site that day, who had to endure so much, and make sure that we honor them as well.
Board members? Okay. Yes.
As a board member, whenever anything happens on a campus, we are told that support systems are in place. The district is doing everything that they can to support the teachers, the students, everybody on campus. This is a question that I'm posing to the district, and I would really like to hear from CEA specifically about what the supports are, like really, realistically, what are the supports? Is it enough? And what's the wish list for supports that the district is not providing? Just because I do hear a lot about teachers, I do hear a lot about students, and I'm not sure I hear enough about certified staff and safety staff, what those supports are.
The next item is 2B, review and discussion of PXU's executive team safety recommendations for the 2023-2024 school year. Dr. G.
President Ross, members of the board, we set aside some time tonight on this agenda as per a previous comment and comments that we made over the last couple of months. We've had discussions about safety here in Phoenix Union. We've looked at student safety committee recommendations, listened to community feedback, also had a chance to listen to and read about a couple new safety proposals from the governing board, two governing board members in particular. And as I shared last board meeting, that our job over the last couple months has been to help facilitate the deliverance of that information, but we haven't necessarily commented on what are some things we really think we need to have in place. And so tonight I'm just going to share a handful of thoughts from our executive team, but not just our own perspective. It's from a group of people as well. What I'm going to share with you all are a few things. Number one, every year Phoenix Union reviews our systems and our structures in the spirit of continuous improvement to make sure that every year we try to improve policy, practice, et cetera. We also look at our annual safety data. We're going to look at next month. We're going to look at discipline data, but we also look at safety data. How many acts of violence did we have on or near campuses? How many breaches might have we had? How many firearms? How many, what's the intercom system status? So we look at all the data that we have to try to make decisions about next year. We also, as an executive team, have had a chance to review every single document that the Student Safety Committee reviewed, whether that's the Charlottesville IGA, TNTP, GCI, ASU, for those of you who have been involved. We've read all of the community feedback, looked at the recommendations, looked at the safety proposal, plans and policies, and then we also had a convening, something that we had been planning on doing, even the pre-Bostrom High School incident, but we hosted a convening post-Bostrom, knowing that the concerns were greater and amplified. And so we had a convening recently of association leadership, our safety division, as well as exec team members involved in safety to try to put together what are some things that we think need to be in place for next year, and considering what are the things that the board thought should be a priority for next year as well. So a few things that we have heard that we need to continue to explore. One, we have a lot of fences, cameras, et cetera, but in Phoenix Union, we need faster repairs. That we have some fences and parking lots that get broken weekly. And so what we've heard is we repair them, but often not fast enough. So what's our response time? I know that Ms. Gales and Ms. Tejas are doing an incredible job, but how do we really think about response time better? We're continuing to work on camera, intercoms, fences. We'll continue to try to expedite with this new bond. Hopefully it passes. We can continue to expedite perimeter safety as well. We are continuing to redesign perimeters. We'll continue that work. We've heard from a lot of people that we should revisit metal detectors. Doesn't mean we do them every day, everywhere, but there's a lot of metal detecting technology. And what is that technology? And how could it be used? And where could it be used? And when could it be used? And so our team will continue to explore what's the newest devices that could potentially keep campuses safe, especially if we know there's a threat, especially at some large events. Our team will continue to explore that. We've also heard from many of our staff members, we still have old school keys at buildings. And we did a lot of work to have keys rekeyed and indoor locks, but could we also have key card access to get people in and out of buildings faster, especially in an emergency? And so we'll continue to work on that. Golf carts have turned out to be an important part of safety in Phoenix Union. To get to incidents faster, do we have enough golf carts? When they break down, are they repaired fast enough? And then we also heard within infrastructure that there's a lot of incredible technology today. New apps, new communication tools, new handheld devices. And our team is exploring those, but we'll continue to move as fast as we can to try to implement, whether that's the start of next school year or throughout next school year, new safety technologies around infrastructure. We've also heard a lot from our community around student management, entries of schools. We hear a lot about clear backpacks. You know, is next year the year to bring clear backpacks into Phoenix Union? That our team will explore that. We know that there are schools like Desi and Bostrom pre-pandemic actually didn't allow backpacks. But then during the pandemic, we have one-to-one devices, and so now they bring backpacks largely to carry their laptops. We've been asked to reconsider, should our support schools not have backpacks at all? If we do move in this direction, that should Phoenix Union purchase the clear backpacks year one to kind of remove that financial barrier if that's the direction we're going. We also know that that's not foolproof. What we've shared with governing board, and we'll share publicly, that safety is about layers, right? It's layers from fences to cameras to entry, potentially to backpacks, potentially to metal detectors, to the personnel, to the check-in procedures, to intercoms, to radios. You can think about all the layers of protection. And when every year at the end of the year, and especially in light of Bostrom, and because this is the year where we've gotten feedback from the community, we'll continue to look at all of those layers. Backpacks and entry is a part of that. We also continue to hear that we must continue to define, redefine, and hold everyone available and accountable for district-wide expectations. We know relationships is the foundation for all of our work. So how do we truly systemically build that in? Continued trainings on PBIS and restorative practices. You can't just have rules and consequences if you don't have the positive side, climate, culture, relationships. And we also know consistency is key. But we've also heard is that when we think about district-wide expectations, IDs and attendance and punctuality have to be top of mind for us. That if we're gonna have truly safe campuses, we've heard from teachers, you've heard at the podium this year, if you have 300 students roaming hallways in the middle of class, how can that be safe for those students and others? And so there are things that can be campus to campus. There are things that just have to be district-wide expectations. And so our team is continuing to work on how can we create really clear expectations around day-to-day student management on campuses. We've also heard recently that parking lot registration we need to be consistent with. Phoenix Union used to had very strict parking requirements for students. You had to have a proof of an ID, a proof of an insurance, and then we ran into, well, what if a student doesn't have an ID? What if a student doesn't have insurance? Is that our responsibility to police what they have, what they don't have? And so there were some schools that backed off and said, well, maybe we're just not going to register vehicles. Well, the truth is you can register vehicles without checking your documentation status, right? That we have to know which vehicles are on our campus, because what we've learned this year through data is that vehicles can be places where people put things that shouldn't be on our campuses. And so we've asked our team to reconsider parking lot safety. Who parks there, how people enter. We've heard from campuses like Carl Hayden that parking and parking lot is critically important moving forward. And then revisiting bus protocols that we've heard from a lot of our internal staff as well as the board, we've had a chance to talk about some of the challenges on our busing. We'll continue to look into that. We've also heard a lot of conversation around safety teams. Do they need more money? Do we need more people? Do we need more training? The truth is, we think it's probably all of those. And as we've met with our safety teams, as I shared up there, the need is very complex and layered. Yes, we need to change some of the ratios. I'll talk about that briefly in a second. Yes, we need to increase and improve some of the training. We also, when we talk to our safety teams, they also say, hey, day to day, I need to be treated more like a professional. Day to day, when I interact with students, with staff, with community, how do we elevate me as a professional so that I don't have to fear an interaction, that I don't have to fear when I go up to a staff member or a student to say, hey, can you please get to class? Is that conversation going to end up in a really challenging conversation? So how do we also elevate the respect and civility and professionalism toward our safety teams? What we have also heard is it's not just a ratio. We can't just say we're at 250 to 1, we need to go to 200. What if one campus has 30 buildings and one campus only has 10? So building management, acreage. So we've realized as we've met with our team, it's a combination of ratios and a per campus plan. We also want to make sure that if we're going to dramatically increase safety personnel, that would and could certainly have implications for other job families. If we dramatically increase safety personnel, does that mean we need to increase technology staff for more cameras, maintenance staff, right? So when you touch one job family, it causes a system our size to think about other job families as well. That's also true with compensation. As we met with our teams, we need to consider what other compensation could look like. We already increased safety compensation. We increased length of contract. Is that the right level? Do we still need more? We need to study retention patterns. Why are people leaving? Is it the pay? Is it the training? Is it the onboarding? And then we've heard from many staff members, and I took almost an exact quote up there, that says, hey, don't give me $2 more an hour to then go out and be the safety personnel and a police officer and an investigator and a technician. Right? If you're going to give me money, more money, train me to do the job that I'm trained to do. And if we need other roles, don't give me more money in exchange for a police officer. Don't give me more money in exchange for other people. If I need to be compensated more, compensate me more. But what other personnel and systems need to be in place? Don't just give me money and say, hey, that's enough. And we hear that over and over again from our people. We've also heard we need to continue and expand trainings, not just ongoing, but also onboarding. That when we bring on a new staff member, campuses want them at that day. But really, we should hold them back for longer trainings to make sure when we put them on campuses, they're ready. And then finally, we continue to hear from our safety teams, from CEA leadership, that is there a role that is somewhere between a safety assistant and a police officer, like a behavior technician, that's even higher trained, that can handle really aggressive students in that moment that are really aggressive, that need to be de-escalated at very different levels, maybe even need to be restrained at very different levels. And so our team is continuing to work, and board has great interest in this too, of like, is there a middle ground of someone that's trained at an even higher level to de-escalate these particular cases? And so behavior technician job description or something like that may very well be forthcoming to supplement what's happening on safety teams. Also law enforcement, what we continue to hear from our community is that law enforcement plays a critical role in school safety. Still a hot debate about what that role is, how many, what that looks like, what do they do. But as we heard from the community this year through student safety, we heard it from our vendors that are around 90% of our community said, hey, we need a relationship, formal relationship with law enforcement. What that looks like is still up, the model is still up to debate. What we also know day to day doing this work is that we do need a formal and highly responsive relationship with police. That especially when really challenging incidents happen, we need a very good, fast relationship. As as the public knows and this board knows, the Student Safety Committee voted for 1 officer per school. I had a chance to convene association leadership, safety division, exec team, and said, hey, if you were the sole decision maker, what is it in the context of today that we would need to keep campuses safe? And that group came back to the same recommendation that the safety committee did, which is in the context of 2023, 1 officer per school. And so that came straight from leadership and staff members inside. That 1 per school is a model that the employees and leadership feel is the right model. As I put up there, if that's not a model that the board supports, even though clearly we hear that month after month, and or if they're not available, because the reality is that even if we said we want 22 officers, they may not be available, then we would encourage the governing board to adopt a regional model, but put as many officers in each region as you are willing to put. At the beginning of this year, we said 2 might work. The truth is, in the context of 2023, and I've shared this with the governing board, where Phoenix was in 2022 is not where Phoenix is in 2023, and I don't think it's where Phoenix is going to be in 2024. And so 1 to 2 officers per region we don't think is sufficient. And so if in fact 1 per school is not in support or there's not enough officers, that we would ask the board to put as many officers in each region as possible, whether that's 3, whether that's 4, whether that's 5, based on availability. And as the governing board knows, we would pursue safety grant funding to fund as many officer positions as possible to handle those issues that law enforcement needs to play a role in. And then we also last year adopted a director of campus and community position, community safety, and we've rehired that role, and so continue to kind of push that role to provide daily support and training on our campuses. We've also heard loudly and clearly from the board and from the broader community that wraparound support matters. Social workers, counselors, psychologists, interventionists, that's all inside of what we know is called an MTSS structure, multi-tiered systems of support. We've heard from governing board and from broader community, can we increase those ratios? Do we have enough social workers? Do we have enough psychologists? Our team not only will continue to strengthen MTSS, we're studying the financial impact of the recommendations. You heard last month that one of the safety proposals was about $38 million. We can't afford that, but what can we afford? And what should we afford? And how do we prioritize of all of those roles? Where do we invest? And is there workforce for that? So we might say we want 20 more psychologists next year. If they're not available, then maybe we need 20 more social workers, right? So once we prioritize, I'm just giving a random number. Once we prioritize what role, we also have to match that with workforce availability to make sure that we don't give a false sense of security to our campuses to say, hey, you're going to get 3 more of these and then they're not available. We want to build a realistic safety plan. We've also been talking about an advocate job description that helps our students and families navigate the complexities of the legal system. We'll continue to revisit that. We've been at that work for almost 12 months now. It's probably the most complicated job description we've worked on because it gets into court and private matters and the legal system. But our team will continue to work on what that could look like and should look like. We've also heard from governing board, what role could police assistants play in this? Members of the City of Phoenix Police Department, that maybe they could play a role in student safety that could help. We're continuing to explore that. Our first conversation is that police assistants help with very low level, like tickets, traffic tickets. They actually can't help with some of the campus issues we want them to, but we'll continue to explore that because we've heard that from the board. And then we also heard from the governing board, what do we need to do around, can we create a threat matrix? And how do we navigate and think about all the threats that come in, and can we be faster and better and stronger in how we handle threats? Training and professional development will continue. The truth is, relationships and training are probably 2 of the most critical things. We could add 500 new people, and if they're not trained and not building relationships, it's not going to matter. And so we'll continue to think about the levels of training. And we've also heard really clearly that we can't just train safety personnel. All of our 1,500 teachers need to know exactly what's happening every day and how to manage emergencies. We've also heard that when we go into lockdown, many of those have happened at lunch, and they go behind closed doors with our cafeteria workers. If they're not trained, and some of you know the story, I've shared this, during the Central High School lockdown, my son was locked down for over 2 hours with a cafeteria worker, and she was incredible. But was she incredible because we trained her to be incredible, or because she was naturally incredible? And we have to ensure that our systems and our training get to all 3,000 to 4,000 employees and all job families. And we can do that through summer, I-days, after schools, weekends, extra compensation, but we can't let time and money get in the way of training everybody to make sure we're ready. And then finally, to make sure that this summer, we launched our first major summer of training last year. We need to continue to do that this year and make sure we have the right academies this summer to launch next school year. I have just a few more slides. Large event management. Some of our biggest challenges this year have been at large events, football games, basketball games, and quite candidly, some of our toughest moments this year were actually at graduation this year. And so our team is going to explore, is it time for us to implement the large event management protocols that professional sports, collegiate sports, and actually our neighboring communities have already adopted? If you go to a football game at Tempe or in Chandler, you're going to have clear backpacks, and your bags are going to be checked, and they're going to monitor crowd very differently. If they're concerned, they might wand. You might walk through a metal detector. If needed, many of our sister schools have students and family only. You can't just show up if you're a community member if we're worried about attendance. So our team, or safety, our team's going to explore those. Is it time for us to do more to make sure that large-scale events are safer, but still create an environment where people want to come and participate and are treated like the way they should? And then we also know that communication is important, that our team continues to work on fast communication, appropriate communication. There's also a lot of safety technology that could allow us to even move faster, new apps, online. We know that our emergency comms need to get faster. We were pretty fast at Bostrom. But the reality is our students will always be our first communicator. And I think that's something this board, even when I leave, that'll always be a criticism, but that's the reality. If we go into lockdown, within 10 seconds, students will text their parents. There's no communication that will be fast enough for us to get to parents before their students, and even for us to get to staff before students get to parents. And so this district, again, I won't be here, has to continue to find that sweet spot of how fast do we communicate, and can we, but how do we leverage students, because they're always going to get information out before we do. And that's going to be something that school systems continue to be challenged with. But part of the way that we can communicate better, and that's part of the new job description, is we need more parent contact information that's accurate. We, to this day, I would guess only half of our families, maybe 2/3, have truly accurate information. I would say, I see Marla Zimmerman, when you send letters home to your students, half probably come back in the mail. Right, I see many of our staff members here. So how do we dramatically increase? And our team's working on that. They have a plan for that. And once we have your information, you should not be able to opt out of emergency communication. We found out that's legal. We can actually make it so you can't opt out of emergency communication. So our team will work on that system as well. And then continue to work on more channels. It can't just be text and dialer. What are the other ways we can reach our families? And then I think the last thing that I'll just leave with the board, and I'll revisit this next week, that there are other safety recommendations that were brought forth to this team around executive limitations and different oversight. And on Thursday, I'll lean in a little bit more to that around school safety and the difference between safety policy and safety operation and management day to day. And we see and experience a lot of rub up here around safety. And a lot of that's because there's some rub between what's policy and what's operation. And there was a lot recommended that I'll cover a couple of those next month. I'm trying to be mindful of time and the work at hand today that I'll share more conversation around. We need to be very careful that there are lanes that we all need to stay in to do this work really, really well. There's a couple things that we'll comment on, I'll comment on next month. But I'm very grateful to the executive team and the governing board for leaning in on these issues, even when we don't agree, even when I'm clear I think that's governance and we're operation. I'll continue to lean into that. But I want to do so in a way that, at the end of the day, President Ross has said this, we have the same goal, everybody safe. We have different perspectives of what that looks like, but we have different goals, everybody safe. We'll continue to be very clear about what we think safety looks like and feels like, and try to get policy that matches that to ensure safety on our campuses. And I'll stop there, President Ross.
Thank you. Board members, questions? Questions? Yes, Member Napa.
Thank you so much, President Ross and Dr. Gaston. I brought this up in my comments before when we were talking about Bostrom, but there are a lot of staff who are responsible for creating safety on our campuses. I would like to know what positions need to be recognized and support for them strengthened. So what positions need to be recognized and what support needs to be strengthened for them. And I would like to hear specifically from CEA leadership. I know I see Anastasia, I know I see former CEA president, Vanessa, thank you so much. I was on a committee with you for 7 months. I know your name. So I would really like to hear directly from them on that question.
Yep, President Ross and Clerk Napa. Tonight we didn't notice publicly. We in fact said that there would be no public comment at all about safety. But I know that every month, and I know in 2 days, that CEA leadership has a chance at the podium to give their president's report. And so maybe those are things they could cover during the president's report as well.
But they're not part of the public. They're our staff. They're our PXU leadership. I feel that we should still hear from them.
Attorney, will you please weigh in on this?
If you are asking questions of staff, it would be permissible.
We're also, I'm okay with that.
it's
We
up
just
to
have
you,
to make
Chair.
sure that Ms. Jimenez's plural are comfortable, because it's kind of on the spot. I don't know if they were prepared or anything, but if they are, either or both of them are comfortable coming up to the podium to speak, and if not, no pressure, you can speak tomorrow. It's up to you. Thursday, sorry, I don't know my days of the week. Looks like we are getting a speaker to what I'm calling the podium, but a microphone.
So you asked a few questions. So
Will you start by introducing yourself,
yes,
please?
sorry, Vanessa Jimenez. I am the professional development coordinator here at Phoenix Union.
Right, it's not even on. What positions need to be recognized and support for them strengthened for classified staff?
If we're talking around safety, there is a group of employees who can, some already, that's their first line, have a heavy impact on safety. So our safety team members, of course, they do need more support. They do need the training. They do need, as was in the report, they need that level of respect from everybody, that they aren't, a mall cop. They're not a witness. They are there because they are taking a huge risk in order to keep everybody on the campus safe. So that is the first and foremost. If you look at our community liaisons, In the past, they used to assist with a lot of our mandated groups. And so a lot of the students who have those challenges, they went to those mandated groups and they felt a better connection with, usually our support staff look more like our students. It just is what it is. So they felt more comfortable getting that positive choices or that substance abuse mandated groups from those community liaisons. Our student liaisons, they're the ones who make that call when somebody's not there. And so I think those are a couple of positions that rise up. One that we've been talking about pretty much came to light in the pandemic was our student study facilitators. They're the only position out of all of our support professionals who can have that one-on-one or supervision over a group of students. And so they hold in their job description, it is detention, it is that student study hall during lunchtime, or if a student has to be removed from class, they are sent to that classroom in order to spend that time in there while till the next bell rings, or so that they can get to the next class so that they're not missing a whole day of learning. So those are positions that they have a heavy impact on student success through safety and having those conversations with some of our more challenging students. So we do have to look at supporting them, giving them more training, and elevating their positions. They do hold they have the ability to make a huge difference, so we do need to look at those positions. If we talked about I think part of it was on some of the things that need to be repaired more quickly. We met, and in our convening, we have 3 welders for the whole district. And so those are the ones who predominantly fix our fences every other day when someone can't stay in the lines. We rely on our grounds and our heavy equipment teams. They're not very big. So we are pushing them to try to get this work done and crossing over. So heavy equipment now is helping welding. Like, I'm going to dig the posts, you put them in. I'll weld a little bit to get you started. So we have quite a few positions that I think, because we always think safety is the safety assistants, but there's all these other positions who play a role. And so I think we just have to look at them and see how can we further assist. I know the mention of behavior techs. We've had that conversation at DESI for a few years. How do we assure that we have the right and consistent people there? Like, we can get them from companies, but you get one person on Monday, Tuesday, and the students are starting to build that rapport, and then on Wednesday the company sends somebody else. So looking at what is the right position, because when we talk to the safety staff at DESI, they're like, I can only do so much. I can't always be able to walk them back off the ledge if I have this many more students. So those are just different positions that I think, like, the discussions are starting. And so we really need to have those probably a little more quickly, so that we're better prepared this school year and that we can do the training. We have the ability to do a lot more trainings. We have a lot that we can start utilizing while we build more. So I think those are challenges along with solutions, because I don't just do issues, I do challenges and what's that solution. So
Thank you. I see you. Member Napa.
Thank you, Vanessa. I have a follow-up question. What I heard was that the safety team specifically needs more support, training, and I heard the word respect. Is there a respect issue at work? By who, and how can the district get better?
unfortunately, it's campus by campus. Some campuses, the students have a extremely high level of respect. It's generational respect. So I would say in some of our more southern campuses, they have generations. They have graduates who now work there on those safety teams. They're generations of families. So when you think of academies, Chavez and Fairfax, those are generations of families who now work on those safety teams. And they are able to build that relationship as well with their certified staff as well as their leadership. Other campuses, it's just not the same. Those populations are a little more transient, and so you don't have as many generations of families. And so when they work there, they're having to build that respect not only from students, but from the community as well as leadership. And sorry, y'all called me up here. unfortunately, we still have to look at that certified, non-certified, and it's real. It's real in the district. Sometimes, well, it's not a degreed position or it's not a certified position, and it's not everywhere. As I said, it's not everywhere, but it is real, and it's at every different level, from students to community to colleagues, all the way to leadership on campuses. So it is unfortunate.
Thank you. Member Hernandez.
Thank you, President Ross and Clerk Napa. Yeah, so I heard around the trainings, that's kind of where I was like, oh, okay, like what, I wanted to ask you, Vanessa, what improvements need to be made in the trainings? And like, where are we succeeding and what needs to be changed?
Accessibility. For support professionals, technology is not our strength. So we can't just assign training online, go do it for 30 minutes and hope for everyone to be able to log in and do it. So accessibility, language, that's another challenge. We have started these last few years of doing more. Could we do more? I'm not going to raise my hand and say, ooh, give it to me. But if that was what I had to do, I would. Because we've already taken things that were online and put them into in-person and in multiple languages so that the accessibility is. In shameless plug, we have over 500 people signed up for Summer Academy. And so that's a tool that we can use. Dr. Gaston mentioned iDays. We have the opportunities. It's just the access for our staff, giving them that time to be able to fully participate. And I think we've done good the last few years, even for our cafeteria staff. This last year, we negotiated 2 days for our part-timers to come in and be a part of those campus trainings so that everyone hears the same thing. So we're getting there. Now it just seems we have to go faster.
Thank you. Member Napa and then Member Parr.
To my previous question about respect, I don't think I heard, and probably you need more time to think about this, but how can the district do better? So you don't have to answer that now. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on it, what CEA's thoughts are on that. Again, doesn't have to be now. It could be at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Member Parr.
I just, my comment, Vanessa, is for you. I think just a thank you for you, because I know you've worked really hard to get to the Summer Academy for ESPs. You've put a lot of time and energy into that, and I think your leadership on that front has helped us to institutionalize a bit more. I would love to hear from you that I know you said we need to go faster. So what would that look like for you? What supports or resources do you need to scale that? And then I would also think about, summer training is one thing, but we're onboarding ESPs throughout the year. So a better onboard, what your insights on how we better onboard and support employees throughout the academic year would be really helpful as well. Now, given your new role and the work that you're doing there, I think you can provide a lot of great insight. So just not for you to react to or respond to now, but I'd love for us to really think about that going forward.
I think first shot at that is, like I said, I'm one person and we have 1,400 plus employees. As Dr. Gaston mentioned, there's 9 career families, and within those 9 career families, there's 273 positions. And so you have such a spectrum from one end to the other. And so it's getting more hands on deck so that it's consistent throughout the year. So onboarding is one thing, but that universal or foundational for your position or your career family is where we just have to put in more work. We're starting it, but we just need more hands on deck.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Member Napa, Clerk Napa.
Again, think about this, but if you have a response, I would love to know specifically, the district is having a hard time finding and keeping safety assistants. Why do you think that is? What improvements can be made to attract and keep more of our safety assistants? So attracting them and also retaining them.
So this year, I think we had a memo of agreement in place where they were able to get a sign-on stipend. And luckily, we try to think it out as much as possible for the long haul. So it wasn't just you get it after 90 days. It's a 2-year plan to try to build that consistency and for us to work on, like, what can we do to help make it better? So we did have that for this school year. So what does that look like moving forward? I don't know. That's a funding question. I think our job description's kind of clear, but what does it look like before they even get to the campus? You have your onboarding of benefits and, you know, this is who we are, but what is that gonna look like when you get to the campus? It's not just ushering, get to class, it's a relationship. So what are those, you know, universal competencies that somebody needs before they even get to our campus with our students? You could have worked safety or come from a background, but once you get to our campuses, it's so different and it's so relational. So making sure that before they get to the campus, they understand that these are our students, they're our babies. Like this is what you need to know before you get there. This is what our staff are like, and this is what, you know, administration looks like, this is what our community looks like. So they all know and get the exact same thing. So no matter which campus they get dropped on, they all have that same universal yet foundational knowledge before they get to our campuses. Because it's not, like we said, it's not, every campus isn't the same. It's just not.
Members? Come on, keep going. You're our Aaron tonight.
I
Wow.
have,
Wow.
See,
Whew. Sorry.
I think that's all I have for CEA. This question's for talent or executive team. What's talent's current process for complaints and what steps are followed? And then that's just like questions within the questions. How will the process
Thank you
for
for
students?
answering that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. How will the process for students compare to what already exists for staff and teachers?
Yeah, I see Juve there. So the complaint process, students and staff?
Yeah, what's the complaint process? What's talent's current complaint process? So I would say that speaks more to how staff can process or lodge a complaint, and what are those steps? Then I have a third question, so.
Yeah, I can. I'm just trying to be mindful of how this relates to safety, just to not find ourselves in open meeting law. But just in general, if you have a complaint, a staff member has a complaint against a staff member, we have a form, very simple form and a process that they can fill out. It's actually in our manual. And then you will, if you're certified, you'll start with our certified director, classified with our classified director, and then there's a process that's followed. So it's a very simple form. And then for students, likewise, on a campus, if they have a complaint or a concern, they can actually go to the APS office. They actually have a form where they can fill that form out. And it can be a concern against another student, against a staff member, against a community member. And then, of course, as we shared with the board, we also have a report it. So if they're worried about something, safety concern or bullying, or they can actually use our report it process as well.
Another question. So infrastructure. Infrastructure needs that were identified post-Bostrom. Are those infrastructure repairs and improvements accounted for in the 2023-24 budget?
President Ross, members of the board, Clerk Napa, I'm just going back to infrastructure. So a couple of things. Number one, faster repairs. could, as Vanessa alluded to, could mean more FTE. It could just mean tighter timelines. So not sure if that requires more funding. The continuing to do fence camera intercom work, that's based on current personnel. But that's part identification of the issues and then, assignment of those work orders. The continue limited and safe entries, that's built into the current bond and the next bond. So if you visited Betty Fairfax 4 years ago and today, the entry looks very different. Desi, 4 years ago today, then, so that's built into current and future. Metal detectors, access card exploration. There are a lot of, even inside of ESSER, but a lot of the safety grants actually can cover those things. So school safety, as you all can imagine, that there are a lot of safety grants that aren't even competitive. You just have to write for them at the state level and at the national level. So if in fact we get to these point where we're implementing things like access card exploration, et cetera, a lot of those would be grant funded, not necessarily out of M&O.
Yes, Member Parr.
I just have one quick comment on the note about respect for our employees. I think respect for our employees starts at the top, and it is incumbent on this board, imperative that this board model what it means to respect our employees, from our education support professionals to our certified staff to our administrators, and that includes listening to them when they are requesting needs, resources, whether or not it aligns with your political ideology or not. Actually listening to our employees matters and is at the core of respecting the professionals that work in this system day in and day out. And again, it starts at the top, and it should be modeled by the governing board. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other comments or questions? Okay. The next item is 2C, review and discussion of governing board safety priorities as a follow-up to the May 16th safety study session. 1 second. Since I did mention Member Marquez, I want to check in with him to see that he is hearing us clearly and that if he has any questions or comments, he can chime in. My fabulous tech team that does a great job, is he online? Has he indicated that he can? Yes. Do you Member Marquez,
Yeah.
I poked a little fun into you in jest. I just want to check in and make sure that you are heard. Do you have any questions or comments about anything that's been said?
No
thus far?
comment. No comments at this time. I heard the poke.
It was in love. It was in love.
Thank you.
The next item is 2C, review and discussion of governing board safety priorities as a follow-up to the May 16 safety study session. Dr. G.
All right, President Ross, members of the board, the next two items I will actually turn over to Ms. Andrade and the team. I know Eileen and Claudia are up there. As you all know, Ms. Andrade soon will become next superintendent. Tonight she's here as CIO as well, but also shepherding the processes in the next year. So I will, for this item, and again during item 2D, we'll turn it over to Ms. Andrade.
Thank you, Dr. Gustin, President Ross, members of the board. I am going to attempt to go through the IGA quickly and point out to you where it aligns with the key areas of the Student Safety Committee. I will not read word for word, as I know you're all going to go home and probably read it.
Yeah, President Ross, will you start with 2C on the board priorities? And just kind of remind them what's in board docs and the things that they looked at. Yeah, there you go. Yep, thank you. So we'll start with 2C and then we'll get to 2D.
Okay, President Ross, members of the board, I got a little ahead of myself. We have put together a document for you all, and Claudio actually was responsible for this, where we took all these stickers from our last time's activity, and we just kind of did a count based on the topic and based on the color. I can tell you we looked for majority, so 4 or more, and we looked at the color. It should be no surprise to you all that the top 3 areas of urgency or immediate were IGA, with 6 red. One of the second ones that really came up to the top was infrastructure, with 4 of the red. And I believe the third area, I'm not seeing it right now, but it was around safety teams, and increasing safety teams, with also 4 red immediate. And the back page has them all ranked for me. Imagine that, I was doing a little scavenger hunt. But what's important is I got the first 3 right. And then you kind of get into the middle where it's like 3-3. It's still important. It's not majority, but it's still very important. And you heard that tonight from Ms. Jimenez, community liaisons, counselors, a threat matrix, a complaint process. And then you start to get into the 2s again. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you'll see that rank order of priority. Can't have everything be a priority or you have no priorities. And I think it'll be really interesting, again, to take a look once we knock out some of the red, to really start to look at a roadmap of the green, which will be the 23-24 school year. And, once the bond passes, when the bond passes, I should say, that long-term 23 to 27 plan for many of these areas. Not all, but many of them. So we're excited to explore these, but again, in the spirit of time, I'm going to leave this ranking with you, and we are going to get to our first most popular priority, which is law enforcement IGA, with 6 of you ranking it as an immediate concern. Thank you, Claudio. All right, so going back to the IGA, again, I'm not going to get too into it. It is a 16 or 17-page document that is available for public review. But I want to start by framing that the Student Safety Committee really lifted up a few key areas that they wanted to see in an IGA. And then there's all this legal stuff in an IGA, that's why we have Ms. Fernandez here. So I want to point out to your attention what the Student Safety Committee really wanted to see, which were the guiding principles from Charlottesville, training of our officers, that selection qualification process was important to them, accountability was important to them, student protections in general, but if we really unpack that even further, student protections in the areas of searches, investigations, interviews, arrests, and especially our most marginalized students. So you talk about students with special needs or cognitive disabilities, and how are we supporting and treating them when it comes to police. So having said that, I believe we have captured all those key areas in our IGA. I want to just call attention as we go through it to the different areas. I will not stop at every area because many of it you can read on your own. And please feel free to respond with the questions. Board Member Ross or President Ross?
I love how you are like, let's get through this. I just want the public to know that we are now done with 2C because we didn't officially transition to the.
Oh, I thought it was a
Totally
combined
okay.
item.
I'm
such a rookie.
It's totally okay. You're fine. You are good. But just to notice the public that we are now on item 2D, review and discussion of the law enforcement model and intergovernmental agreement with the City of Phoenix for law enforcement support.
Awesome. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into the IGA. You should have a few versions with you in front of you. The first thing I want to point out is, again, in number 2, which is that statement of purpose and the guiding principles. For those of you that know the Student Safety Committee, you'll recognize many of these guiding principles. And those of you that are familiar with Charlottesville, you will also recognize those. I'm going to jump ahead now to page 2 under number 5. around these qualifications of our officers. It was really important that we had bilingual or multilingual when possible. Experience working with youth and training that qualifies them, as well as any kind of relevant certifications to be on a school campus. While we did not have luck in our discussions around resumes, we do have the ability to receive and maintain, we believe, the qualifications and the criteria of officers, as well as the right to obtain discipline records per public records laws. Lastly, on the top of page 3, we know that they need to have that knowledge, that experience, and that training, but it's not just a one-stop shop, that it's, we want them to also participate in training with us ongoing year after year, especially as it pertains to students with special needs and individuals with any mental health challenges. Continuing on in the spirit of the committee, the training for our officers, nonviolent tactics, de-escalation, restorative justice. We will require required by grants obtained to pay SR or RROs in this case. Specific training as it relates to our community, whether that's values-based, culturally sensitive and responsive trainings, district mandated trainings around restorative justice, special needs, and again, social emotional learning training we will provide to our officers. The next section deals with cost. I don't want to get too into that. We know that there's a safety grant, and as far as any additional costs, we can pursue grants or realign resources. That's just what we would do. Student protections, big section here, and it really starts on page 4. And again, I'm not going to read through all the protections because they get unpacked later in the IGA under the arrests, questioning, interviews, searches, things like that. But again, really staying very clear with our officers are not involved in student discipline. They're not involved in enforcing the code of conduct. They are called when needed, whether that is for a safety issue or a criminal investigation. And again, we've really tried to narrow their focus as much as possible. In that spirit, we have also outlined in this IGA the PXU roles and responsibilities of our school administrators and our staff to have that safe and secure culture on our campus. Again, we agreed to the code of conduct, mitigate information to the Phoenix Police when applicable, recommended trainings, mandated reporting. I could go on and on. But again, this is what we agree to as a district, and this is what we currently do. And being very clear that we don't want officers doing this work. This is our school officials and our administrative work. On the last part of student protections or PXU responsibilities, you'll see working collaboratively for that complaint system that we talked about earlier. If there is a negative reaction, we want our students as staff and our visitors to know about it, but we also want to work collaboratively with Phoenix Police because that's who the complaint was against, and so they need to know that as well. We thought it was very important that we had the ability as our responsibility to remove an officer in the event that there's some sort of discipline or even reassign an officer. We've asked for daily documentation to be kept by the officers to include anytime they have an interaction of substance with a student around mandatory law enforcement, criminal investigations, any kind of questioning, or any immediate safety concerns. At the bottom of page 5, you'll start to see the city's responsibilities and roles, which are very typical of the police. They are in a proactive partnership with us. They will help us with school crises, safety prevention, public safety, preventative crime, enforcing laws. Again, assisting victims, assisting with criminal investigations, providing training, and providing information on any kind of community safety issues. We move on now to the communications and requirement, and this section really speaks a lot about the reporting that's necessary. Mandatory reporting, whether that be, a serious offense, 13-706, those weapons, dangerous instruments, selling or using, certain drugs, and this again is all taken straight out of statute. We have another section on communication procedures and information sharing with the police. Initial police contact, how that goes about, the protocols there. Should I use page 10? Okay. Moving on to, I think I'm now moving on to page 8. Again, non-emergency and really some guidance for the investigation. When at all possible, we don't want our police in general coming on unless it's a planned visit, if it's disruptive to the school day. Really make arrangements with the principal and the parent or the guardian if the student is under the age of 18. Releasing records is all within FERPA. It goes on, and then on page 9, we talk a little bit about requests for traffic services and event support. Again, mirroring a lot of Charlottesville. Athletic and other event support. School and police investigations. Again, police not getting involved if it's a code of conduct unless they believe it's a criminal offense. On the bottom of page 9, there is a huge section devoted to interviews, and we have really prioritized our students in that and making sure that their parents are notified, they're not left alone, and they're protected. Because I know that can be very intimidating. Again, though, calling parents isn't always the best course of action if the case involves child abuse, family violence, etc. There is a time to protect the victims, and so we are, per DCS, not supposed to be telling the parents and completing the investigation in a different sort of way than the traditional. And that all has been outlined on page 10. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes police come on and they have to interview staff. And again, it's not always about the students. Sometimes it is staff. We will work directly with the principal. CEE staff also supports that process. And searches, we're now on page 11, moving into page 12. Typically, that threshold for a search is much lower for an administrator who has reasonable suspicion, whereas the police really go forth with a warrant or probable cause. But again, it's outlined who does the search, what the role is of the other party during the search, when are there exceptions to this cause. And then lastly, we get to arrests. Again, in the beginning, under student protections, we do have a statement about arrests being, with discretion, not to embarrass anyone, not during maybe classes out and about, just keeping it as private as possible. And then again, that shows up again in number 18 on page 12. And again, whenever practical, We want to accomplish these outside of school hours and not disrupt school, but that's not always the case. And again, required notification to parents. And again, if the student is taken, it's not always taken, but if he or she is taken, we will provide that relevant information to the parent or guardian if they cannot be there. On page 13, we're coming around the home bend here. We have a section around physical intervention by police. And police should not be involved in any physical restraint of any student unless there is an imminent danger of serious physical harm to their self or to others. Section or number 20 is around investigations specifically involving students with special needs. And school personnel should consult with PXU special education staff when needed to ensure they thoroughly understand how a student's actions may be a manifestation of the student's disability. And this consultation will influence or should influence discretionary reporting to police. Again, this whole section really kind of is dedicated to that and walks us through all that. Reporting of children suspected to be in need of protection around child abuse. And then moving to page 14. We would like our partnership with Phoenix Police to help us with school inspection walkthroughs, school safety audits, and to include crisis management, emergency management, medical emergency response. They are the experts, and they really can be strong partners in these areas. We also, on number 23, would like to review an evaluation of protocols and performance. So we want to be able to ask our staff and our students quarterly, and here it says at the beginning and the end of each school year, to really get a sense of our culture and our climate, which is a strong indication of how safe our kids feel on campus. We will also continue to collect, and we refer to it as call-outs, but for emergency services, which separates how we're using police. You know, are we rolling fire, or is it for, a weapon or something serious? So I think those will be separated out and collected. And we will meet with Phoenix Police annually to review and make recommendations to amend this agreement as required to meet the needs and enhance the services of both organizations. And then as a follow-up to that, we have regular status meetings that we have with them, where if there's been any problems, anything that comes to light, then we don't want to wait. We need to talk to them right away about it. Again, I feel the need that we'd be able to pick up the phone, but that we would have ongoing status meetings. Whether those are monthly or every other month, that's something to be determined. But again, that's called out as part of the agreement to continue that collaboration and that communication between both agencies. The rest, again, is around legal things. Fingerprinting, E-Verify, right? Cancellations. I can go on and on. Most of it just is outlined all the way through page 16. Very standard contract IGA language, correct? Yes. So I would ask at this time, this really concludes the highlights, but again, we really worked hard to ensure our guiding principles, our training, our qualifications, our selections, our student protections around arrests, searches, investigations, that we are protecting our students and our community to the greatest extent possible, while still allowing that much space for law enforcement, which is all we need in our safety plan. With that said, I look forward to your comments and any questions you may have. And hopefully we can get moving forward in the right direction around this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions, comments? Because this is the last item, we're going home if you all are done. No questions?
Just-
Member Parr?
It's just more for like the public to understand the process. Dr. J, I think on Thursday, the team will come forward with recommendations on a model and what that looks like. And because right now the IGA has a blank number of officers, for example. So just clarity around that for the public to know that that is coming.
Excellent. Yeah, President Ross, members of the board, a couple things. One, this IGA, before we go home tonight, this draft IGA will be inside of board docs for the public to view. It is already. Thank you, SB. So it's in board docs if anyone wants to review it themselves. And then, yes, what you will see is it doesn't list a number of officers, whether that's school-based or regional or whatever. The IGA language is the IGA language. Depending on the actual model chosen, we'll have slight adjustments to this potentially. But that will take place over the next 48 hours, to be honest. The board will give feedback. Tonight they had a chance to take a look at some language that needed to be discussed behind the scenes. They're seeing it here. They're going to send feedback to us over the next 48 hours. We'll make adjustments to this IGA. We'll come back on Thursday night, have some private exec session discussions around IGA and model, et cetera. Then we'll have public discussions around IGA and model. And then ultimately the goal is by this Thursday night to have the board approve a model and an IGA, even if there's some other modifications that need to take place. And that is because once the board picks a model and IGA, it then goes to the city for the city to look at the language, look at their officer availability. So it starts a little bit of a ping pong over the next few weeks in preparation for August.
Thank you. Clerk Napa?
I'm just wondering where on board docs the IGA is, and I did notice that up on the screen versus version 3, there were some discrepancies. I just want to make sure that the board has the correct version and the public have the correct version.
Okay. We'll make sure it's accurate and post. SB, do we post on study session or board agenda for first? Okay, so it'll be on both study session and June 1. It's currently on June 1, and then we'll just make sure that what's reflected online is the most accurate one.
Thank you.
Members? Going once, going, alrighty. The next item is 5A, request for future agenda items. Members? Going once, alrighty. Clerk Napa?
Just to be clear, this is request for future agenda items for regular board meetings as well.
Yes.
Phoenix Union High School District has a Native American education program, yeah. Phoenix Union High School District has a Native American education program funded by federal dollars. We track our indigenous students, especially those that can produce proof of enrollment in a state or federal tribe. As a board member, I have not heard very much about our Native American education program. I want to know what are our district's state responsibilities and federal responsibilities. I need to know how we are meeting those currently, and then I am aware of an audit that happened a number of years ago. I want to know what the circumstances of that audit was, and I want to know the findings of that audit. Lastly, I attended the Native American the Native American convocation at Camelback High School. I was touched. I was sincerely impressed. I was saddened that we only had about 30 students there. I have heard that we have hundreds of students, if not 1,500 Native students here at PXU. How many of those students graduated that are indigenous, and why? I know that our staff do what they can to do outreach. I want to know what this board can do to make sure that outreach to those students is not just more meaningful, but more impactful. I would really like to see double, if not triple, the amount of graduates there. The other thing about Native American education, I am also aware that there is a gap between jurisdictions. So students who live on a reservation, specifically Gila River, there is tribal sovereignty, there is jurisdiction, there are things that played at a federal level, state level, and municipal level. I'm really concerned about what happens when a student has a conduct issue, if they have a safety issue, if there is something going on with that student. How is PXU working with our tribal sovereign communities to work with the families and to work with those students? I feel that that's a huge gap and we're not ready for it. Again, I'm not looking for this on Thursday, but I do want this to, I really do want to start looking at this and working on it in the next academic year.
No, but just President, noted on the 4 items around state and federal responsibilities, the audit, convocation, and then this jurisdiction student issue.
Any other items? Member Oliver.
Hi, yeah. President and Superintendent, one of the things that has really been concerning me, and I know we've received as a board a lot of information about hiring and promotion practices at Phoenix Union. And so I think that that is something that we need to address in future agenda items, get report back on, specific, positions and how we went through the hiring process and make that more transparent to the board so that, when we have the community or even people within Phoenix Union come to us, we have the information to know how that process works so that we can make sure that the hiring processes are fair and consistent across the board.
President Ross, yes, I was going to say thank you, HR attorney. We will. But yes, noted on process for sure.
Yes, Clerk Napa.
One thing that I failed to mention in my in talking about Native American education program, the other thing that I want to also know is what's our current advisor, Native American advisor to staff to student ratio, specifically around concerns that I've heard from parents and students and even community groups that work with our Native students, that it's really hard to get in touch with a Native American advisor. And then the other thing is knowing how our campus staff work with Native students, because the other thing that I've heard anecdotally is once staff hear that a student is Native, that they are enrolled, you need to talk to the Native American advisor. So I need to know what that process is, so that way we can meet the needs of our students, not only on their campuses, but also within the Native American education program.
Noted for sure.
Members? All right, guess y'all ready to go home then. The next item is 5B, motion to adjourn the study session.
Second.
There's been a motion made by Member Parra, second by Member Clerk Napa. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned.